Hello and welcome. I've got a lot to cover, and it's going to get into several different topics in exposing giants games because giants are everywhere. And let me start by, I'll leave that speaker on for right now because I'm going to play a couple of short videos here in a little bit. So before I get into anything, I want to state one thing about my Odin and Freya video, where Odin taught Freya the runes and Freya taught Odin magic. And it was pointed out to me by someone that I trust very much in this realm of thought that there has to be a distinction between what our pagan ancestors had for healing and what is today modern healing. And I 100% agree with that. The today what we have is a corruption of the natural elements that we had then. It is drugs used for profit, big pharma, if you will. So what I was doing in that video was conveying how the overlap between Odin and Freya is why they teach each other those things, and how in northern paganism the doctors and the healers using natural elements were our women folk, and then exposing as well how the very Bible commands Christians, any Abrahamic people, that they shall not partake of any pharmaceuticals, whether that's from our northern pagan days of yore or from modernity. So a book that I bought upon this person's recommendation, I have not read it yet because I've been so busy, and I want to read this book, is this book right here. So if you want to read a good book, this person highly recommends the information in this book as exposing what the pharmaceuticals have done, what has happened over the course of history with different drugs and medications and things of that nature. So I want to be reading that soon. I hope I can. I've got classes starting up here on Monday. So let me get right into the meat and potatoes of what I'm going to be talking about. And that is pictures, mental imagery of things that we have experienced throughout the course of our lives. And those pictures that we have, they create a worldview. And I'm going to pause this for just a minute. I just want to make sure this video is actually playing on YouTube. I don't know if it is. Yes, it says it is. So let me open that up. Just take a look real quick here. Yeah. Okay. All right. And the other thing I wanted to correct before I go into the pictures here is that the previous video I said that I was disappointed with the StreamYard feature because it didn't show the comments that I was looking for. I had to keep going back and forth. That was my error. I am not very profound for my my diode experience, if you will. So my electronics is, I'm more of a give me a bow in nature. So pictures and picture philosophy. When we go through things in life, we record mental pictures, and then anything that happens from that point forward, we only respond to it by those pictures that we have recorded in our mind. So these pictures, if you will, are a prison of sorts, and they lock you into a certain way of thinking. Your ideas, your whole response, your whole reaction to things are through those pictures that you have recorded in your mind. So with paganism, we have different elements that are presenting themselves. And the opposite of the mental prison that people have through the Abrahamic religions, the Abrahamic cults, is to be a free thinker. You can think outside the box because you've expanded your worldview to the point where you have many avenues that you can digest things that are going on. And whether that's in your personal life, whether that's politics, whether that's religion, whether that's the heads on media, and I'll get into some of that in a little bit here. So I have been recently talking about how paganism is northern paganism, or whether you want to call it northern paganism, Norse paganism, Germanic paganism, heathenism, Asatru, whatever name you want to identify it as. It has been morphed and corrupted from our ancestral belief. And I believe that that is an intentional corruption. So welcome, Odin Manusin. I am going to be referencing you here in a little bit with your video that you came out on the Pagans. So that was a very good video. I appreciate you putting that out there. So the mental pictures that you have come down to really what Plato's allegory was. And if I don't know if you remember my previous video with Plato's allegory, where they had people that were chained like in a prison, and they had to stare at one wall, and there was a fire burning behind them. And then you can see from the picture on the screen that people would walk between the people that were chained and the fire, and it would cast images along that wall. So therefore, those people could be engineered, socially engineered or constructed to think how they were programmed to think. And then when one person finally escaped, which you see him standing at the top of the grassy field there, and saw that there was so much more to life, so much more to things than just those images on the wall, he went back down to tell the other captives that were still locked up there, and they didn't believe him. They scoffed, they laughed at him, they made a mockery of him because the images were all that were real to them, because that's all they had in their mind. Once he expanded his mind, expanded his worldview outside of that prison, then he could realize what was fake and what was actual. And when we look at things in our pagan lore, we are led down a certain path, and you're absolutely correct. That Norse pagans are the fakers. I 100% agree with that. And I'm going to be getting into that very shortly. Thank you. And yes, it is called, I call it Asatru as well. That's all a infiltrated corruption of what our belief system actually is. And it started back with the Abrahamic translations of our lore. So how's it going, Steve? Welcome. And I'm going to throw up a picture because I've mentioned these in the past here. Let me hit play on that, and hopefully hardwood trees break into birch trees and then go right up into your fir trees, your pine trees. Every mountain does the same thing. Absolutely beautiful. Mini taiga biomes. Okay, that was a video that I recorded when I was visiting up where I grew up, in an area where I grew up that was familiar to me. And the 2 times catch up. Okay. These taiga biomes are on every high peak mountain there are. Now, if you are not familiar with nature because you grew up in the city and that's all your familiar with is the token tree in the middle of the park that you want to cut down to make an extra parking spot for going to a local mall or whatever in the concrete jungle of life, then you won't be able to relate to what Udalir is. It's mentioned in our lore. It's mentioned in what our ancestry passed down to us. And Udalir is the Udales. Udales is where God Uller lives, the howler I played at the beginning of my videos now. The bear is one of three howlers. You have the bear, you have the wolf, and you have the owl. So this would be lost. That was from a 2018 video where I revisited my homelands up north. So this loss of information is what leads to a corruption of our lore, and then leads to a lot of other fake things that Loki worship and things like this. So I'm going to go into that just a little bit before, because it's all part of Giants games. This corruption is all part of Giants games. And it goes back to what's going on with Israel right now, with different people and support and against. And let me not get ahead of myself. And I'm going to play another video, because this shows what I want you to do is every time you see a green, dark green area on the screen, just realize this is Udalir. Home, and that is Dick's. Over and through here, you have Hunter's Pass, and then way off in the distance, and here you have the mountain in the background. You can't see it very good. Is Marcy and Haystack are back there, and this is Elk Lake. And this is stunningly beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Okay, and let's see my I'm starting to freak a little bit here. So, but that was Elk Lake. Now I have that do not know that do not know why it is called Elk Lake. Let's see, am I back? Let me see if I'm back here. All right, we're going to keep on trucking here. My video is very lagged for whatever reason. And I'm going to just keep on plowing away, and hopefully it comes back. So this loss of information, there used to be an abundance of elk in that area, as well as wolves and stag. The bear was prevalent there, and the fact that this information is lost is to me, it is a cover up to why it was lost. And the reason it was lost is because people did extermination hunts. All you really hear about these extermination hunts with the buffalo out west, as it deals with the American Indian. But the American Indian, what was done to them is late to the party, because this stuff was all done to white people long before it was done there in the Americas. So when we read our lore, we have there's one that says I think it mentions Lax Riverdale, and Lax Riverdale is the salmon river, the dale or the city, the place of abode of the Lax River. Lax meaning salmon. So when I was researching the history of where I grew up, books dating back to the 1600s and 1700s that are in the National Archives. They talked about this area in the Northeast that was teeming with salmon. And in that Norse saga where I mentioned this Lax Riverdale, this was written by someone who visited here long before Columbus ever did, and said that there was a place here with more salmon than he's ever seen in his entire life. Now, if somebody can remember what saga I'm talking about, put it in the comments. I appreciate that. But through my research, I do believe that I've identified this area. It's a dried up area now of the Richelieu River, which adjoins to Lake Champlain, which they're trying to repopulate with the salmon. And this destruction of nature, this Abrahamic destruction of nature, is what we see all along. If you look at the elk population in the Appalachian Mountains, no one for the longest time knew that this elk population was there. It was always out in the Rocky Mountains, but it was indeed in the Appalachian Mountains, and they've reintroduced the elk there now with a healthy herd. This same elk population was in the Northeast United States in the Adirondack Mountains, which is a fringe attachment to the Appalachian Mountains. So what we have via Abraham is an extinction of not only nature or a corruption of nature, but a corruption of our lore. To move on from that, how is this used against us as a people, as a folk, as pagans, as someone who wants to honor our old ways? Well, let me read to you a little bit. That's something that's on the Jefferson Monument. And this is what they do. This is the kind of stuff that they do. Let me just find the page if I can real quick. Okay. On the Jefferson Monument, or I'm sorry, Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C., it says, quote, "Almighty God hath created the mind free," end quote. And that's what it says. Now, if you read that and just that, you will think that, well, Thomas Jefferson was a believer in the Abrahamic God. Well, this is part of that engineering, that social engineering. Because, however, that what precedes that clause of Almighty God is the prior one that says, well aware, quote, well aware that the opinions and beliefs of men follow involuntarily the evidence proposed to their minds. Then it goes into the other one. So this actual quote of Thomas Jefferson said that he was more talking about reason than he was about any Abrahamic God. But the way things are framed, the pictures that are painted, delude people who are then forming their worldview off of those false pictures. So that is just one area. Here's another area. I have to be careful with this one because, well, you'll figure it out. There was a world leader back pre-World War II in the Great Depression era that was lauded in the United States of America as a great leader because he had developed a plan to get his country out of the Great Depression long before, in a shorter time frame than other people did. Then a different picture had to be painted. And the reason for that was because a group of people wanted to reinvent their biblical homeland based on biblical boundaries. The only people in the history of the world who have been authorized or allowed to do that. So in 1948, so that person was painted evil. In 1948, they got their wish. They got their country. And it is modern day Israel that we are seeing what's going on with them today. So this person, even today, is recognized as the most evil person in the world because of that mental programming. He is Satan on earth, for crying out loud. And I have heard that said to me, not that I am saying that, that was said to me. So why? Really? Why? We have people in America who are leaders, are elected leaders who are in a list where they may have been abusing minors in a sexual way, where they have been where they were trafficking them to other billionaires, where they were potentially not only just murdering them but eating them. And yet we are hailing back to a time of in the 1930s and 1940s to say that person is Satan on earth. Why? Because of a picture. And this is where the delusions of politics have come into play. When we look at MAGA and in the support that MAGA gives the current POTUS, even though that POTUS is allegedly in those lists hundreds, if not thousands of times. I have not seen them. I'm only going off of what other people have reported as him being in there. And some of these other people are elected officials. So that is one area where mental imagery forms a worldview that could last for decades upon decades. And it is only based upon a limited worldview. So I want to move on from that into another area, because there's a lot of people right now, and they identify as Christians, that are looking at what's happening in Israel with the Palestinians, where they're killing innocent men, women, and children. And these people are now indignant, and they're in an outrage. Oh my, they have to abandon Israel. Okay. I don't want to be mean, but I'm going to be mean. Are they ignorant? Because that is the modus operandi. It's in the Bible. Did these people did they just like suddenly just plop into existence as a Christian? Because if they read whether they're Zionist or not, it's written in their Bible that is how the Israelites operate. And I just wrote down some of these passages. You can go look them up if you want. Play the video in slow motion and look them up. In the Old Testament, you have the destruction of the groves. What were the groves? The groves were the places of worship of Mother Goddess, the people who worshiped the divine feminine. The Bible writers used divine sanction to go in there and destroy those groves, destroy nature, destroy the people, destroy the objects. Okay, that's in Exodus 34:13, Deuteronomy 7:5, and 12:3. Okay, they give themselves divine sanction. Then you have the murder of innocents. You have the Midianites. Numbers 31. If you read Numbers 31, specifically pay attention to passages 17 through 19, because those passages tell themselves, giving themselves divine sanction through their invented God, to kill all the men, children, kill all the women who have had children, and keep the young women who have not known a man yet for themselves as Epstein victims, if you will. They wrote it. It's right there. innocent victims. But suddenly, all of a sudden, modern Israel is the problem. There shouldn't be a person. All these people who are indignant about modern Israel should throw their hands up and say the whole thing is bunk, but they're not. They still say Christ is king, Jesus is Lord, yada, da, da, blah, blah, blah. Okay. The Amalekites. First, no, I skipped one. Okay, we have the Canaanites and the Amorites in Deuteronomy 20, 16 through 18. Kill all men, women, and children. Then we have the Amalekites and 1 Samuel 15, 13. Kill men, women, infant, and suckling child. But you're indignant about modern Israel. Ezekiel, or and another Exodus 12, 9. All the firstborn of Egypt aborted. Josiah 6:21, Hosea 13:6. My point with all of this is, give me a break. What mental imagery are they trying to paint as they retain or attempt to retain their Christianity while pretending to be indignant about atrocities of modern day Israel when it's written right in their depravity of texts that this is who they have been all along? It's absurd. Then you have the continual wars. It's another thing you notice throughout the entire Old Testament is you have continual wars for Israel. And then what you have in modernity is continual wars. For who? For Israel. But I'm forgetting one. I'm not forgetting it. I specifically held it for last. And that is the 4,500 innocents that were killed in Saxony Grove in Germany. And I got to remove my beautiful mountains. I wrote this back in 2015. Just got to find out what's still on the screen here that's holding me up. There we go. And this is a portion of a much, much longer writing, because I have known about this for a long time. I've been talking about it for a long time. Some of the platforms that I was talking about it on are no longer in existence. G Plus was one of them. But this quote was from the Catholic Encyclopedia. The Saxons were finally brought under Frankish. I put the cap locks in there, just so you're aware. I put the cap locks in there. Were brought under Frankish supremacy by the great Frankish ruler Charlemagne. Now, Charlemagne is another body they can't find. He's a great Frankish ruler. Charlemagne, or Charles Pippinson the Great, that was his actual name, Charles Pippinson, and they can't find his body. So some part of me wants to say, was Charlemagne just another invention of what the church was actually doing, and then they just assigned it to this fictitious character that went into fame and fable for the Catholic Church? So after a bloody struggle that lasted 30 years, 1772 to 1804, Charlemagne was also able to win them to Christianity. The Saxons, being the last German tribe that still held persistently to beliefs in the Germanic gods. At different times, the Saxon wars of Charlemagne have been called religious wars, and the assertion, which cannot be proved, has been made that Pope Adrian had called upon Charlemagne to convert the Saxons by force. End quote. That's in the Catholic Encyclopedia. The very ones who were doing this. 4,500 innocents. So the old writings do indeed state, and quote, the forced conversions to Christianity as religious wars and holy wars, not just pertaining to the Germans and or Charlemagne. Notice that claim is not denied in their actual encyclopedia. So let me, there you go. I think the same way they moved King Arthur from Rome to Britain. Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of shenanigans that goes on with their maneuvering within the church. So Now, the Pope ordered the mass murder, with the Catholic Church hoarding secret documents, their own admission as to possessing secret documents when they release some into public. I talked about this in the past, some into public circulation, as was done within the past year. Now, remember, this past year would have been 2014. Then they say Adrian's order cannot be proved. So this is continuing. The quote, "It is evident that if peace was to be permanent, the overthrow of the Saxons must be accomplished by their conversion to Christianity. The necessity for this was based also on the nature of the Frankish kingdom, in which politics and religion were never separated." I have spoken on that. The church and the king had to support one another in one world government, one world religion, just like is in the Christian heaven. At the same time, it is true that various measures taken by Charlemagne, or the figure called Charlemagne, as the execution of 4,500 Saxons at Verdun in 1782 and the hard laws issued to the subjugated were short-sighted and cruel. This is from the church. The church, however, cannot be made responsible. Oh, this is where they drive the axe or knife into the back of that Charlemagne character. Okay. The church, however, cannot be made responsible in any case for this policy of Charlemagne's, which it never approved. Although the opposition in Saxon territories to Christian teachings had been obstinate only a few decades before, the Saxons grew accustomed to the new life, end quote, because they were tortured in cruel, barbaric ways, because they were murdered, because they were subjugated. As a matter of fact, there's another book that I had written on about the Celtic people, how they were a warlike people, but after a certain many generations, that warlike feature would be overcome by that subjugation, and they'd be more docile, more malleable to both the king and the religion. What do we see going on? We see subjugation. We see people being molded into what the government and the religion wants them to be, useful slaves. So peace, then, going back to the item on the screen, to the Abrahamic cults is the overthrow of all cultures with complete subjugation to them via the forced conversion to their religious false doctrines. They attempt to justify their own barbaric behavior by saying the pagans were attacking them in different locations. Well, of course they were. A foreign element was forcing its way into their lands, torturing and murdering their kin, enslaving their kin, stealing their lands, attempting to subjugate them, taking their women and children. They were fighting off that false foreign belief. Now, people like to, you can read that, finish that on your own, screen grab it. The History Channel with their crap show, Vikings, that abomination of a show, and others like it. I just don't want to pick on that one show with Lindisfarne, where the Vikings attacked Lindisfarne, and this was a provocative attack against Christianity, and poor pitiful me, they're being persecuted again. Now, it doesn't show all of the persecutions, and they don't say all of the persecutions that were being conducted against every other pagan culture that they gave themselves divine command to perpetrate upon every other pagan culture. So, and they use the world's most powerful military to do it. So when we have these recorded in the Christians' own texts, we have these recorded in the Catholic Encyclopedia about the 4,000 at Saxony Grove in Verdun. Now you're indignant about what Israel's doing. That makes no sense. It's foolishness. That's giants games. So one thing I started doing when I was listening to some of these talking heads speak is I started asking question. I have one of those little desk dodes that they call Alexa. And so I'll ask this desk dode, and that's what I call, so they don't fire up. I call it a phone dode, or because otherwise one of your phone will start talking to you and listening to you, or a desk dode, meaning diode. So my desk dode, when I'm watching something, I say, hey, desk dode, is Laura Loomer Jewish? And they give me the pedigree. And then I'll say, hey, desk dode, is Mark Levin Jewish? And they give me the pedigree. And so I'll say, hey, desk dode, what is the net worth of Candace Owens, of Erica Kirk, of Sean Hannity, of Rachel Maddow? And what we come up with is we have very wealthy, multiple $1 million people that are attempting to just paint pictures. But you know what? All it does is get them richer. It doesn't do anything for us other than maybe give us more false images that are related to their Giants games. So it might be interesting if you have someone that you like to listen to. I do that just as a so I can get more of a picture of where they're coming from, why they're saying what they're saying. Because as soon as I hear one of them talking about something and I start relating with that message, and then I hear them say about how they don't need Trump as their savior because Jesus is their savior, then I'm like, all right, time to change the channel, because you're operating like caves on the wall, like or shadows on the wall of a cave. You're operating in that allegory of something that was given to you that you cannot get yourself out of it because of fear, due to fear. When all of the information is there, if you don't have the intelligence to investigate your way out of a wet paper bag open on both ends, then I don't really need to listen to you. And this goes, and it's something that I'm going to return to. This should resound with all of our folk that have children, because we have got to ensure that our children and our children's children have a worldview where they know how to think for themselves. They don't need someone else to think for them and then paint the picture that they want our posterity to view as a reality and then function in that regard. And some of the areas that we need to point out is about nature, the importance of nature, clean water, clean air, how we depend on nature as much, if not more so, than nature depends on us. We just got to stop corrupting nature. We have to operate within the confines, or within at one with nature. See, I was lucky enough to grow up in a mindset as a child, and growing in through my young adult. And then and then thankfully I could pass this down onto my children, that the most important things are ancestry, family, and nature. And my parents, my wife's parents, agree with that. Even though people may identify as Christian, they retain that ancestral strength. Some of them, not all of them. Please don't mistake what I'm saying here. But I was lucky enough to be raised, and so was my wife, that ancestry, family, nature, animal kingdom. These are the things that are important. These are the things that mean the most to us. Family, folk, and frith. Family, folk, frith means peace. And you get that from your family and your folk. So not just the importance of nature, but nature's cycles and how we should function within them. And, you know, I have a subscription to a magazine, Mother Nature, it's called. And then this was years ago. There was an article in there about how America has become so spoiled in their appetite for food that they eat things that are out of cycle. They will spend extra money for items to have them shipped in from across the country or from foreign lands to eat something that is not in season, instead of eating what is in season that you have in front of you. So to abide by cycles of nature and to get our children out in nature, this not only teaches them how physical fitness on hikes and things like this, but it also teaches them survival aspects for when things go very badly, which could be happening soon, or sorry, should I say again. But it expands their picture. It expands their worldview, so they have more pictures to rely upon when forming their worldview, so that they can be free thinkers. They're not just, as I put in that one, the thumbnail for this video, they're not just cattle with the big nose ring led in whatever direction, like Loki worshipers, like Christians, that they are told to go down that road. So they are able to identify who these giants are, and because they can think for themselves. And that's our children is something I'm going to return to momentarily, but I want to go into now Loki worshipers, because wow, you talk about limited worldviews. I think when somebody was painting some of these pictures, they used either a crayon or a chalk, and they're very limited. So I want to remind you, I covered it in the video that I did on Hela, that the name of Loki, let's see, hold on a minute. Let me look at this. The names of Loki's parents, have you looked into it? Laufey, Leaf Island, the tree, Yggdrasil, Farbati, meaning, yes, I have looked into that. Actually, I included that, Odin, Manuson, I included that in my video on Hela, which is I'm about ready to get into right now. I deep dove into the meaning of their names with Lycan and Loki, with his parents' names, with the both mother and father, and it really to really shed light on who Loki is and the whole existence of Hela. So, but Loki's name means this lacking sickness, this loathing. That's what we see. This lacking sickness or self-loathing is what we see in Christianity, that they are nothing. They are a worthless worm without their savior. They will be eternally punished without their savior. So Christianity, with the pictures painted for them, looks at themselves as worthless. And this leads into a mindset, a political mindset, where someone is always looking for a savior, that they cannot save themselves. They need a 45 or a 47 to come along and pull them out from the worthless heap. Now, 45 was a much different than 47. 47 is, for crying out loud. But anyway, that sets the whole stage, that whole mindset. Remember, just like I said about the ancient Celts, how they were a warlike people until after being subjugated for so long, then they become malleable. They're no longer warlike. They're just there to be manipulated, to be hourly wage slaves that the billionaires can use and take your pretty virgin daughters and traffic them to other people, like in Numbers 31, 17 through 19. So this creates the whole mindset of who Loki is. Loki is Jesus. Loki is Yaldabaoth, or Yahweh. And I've pointed this out in the previous videos. So that is Loki's name. And the whole thing with Loki worship, and this is where, look up that video if Odin, Manderson, if you want to throw me a message, I'll put it on the screen of what the name of that video was, so I don't have to leave this feed right here and possibly lose my internet. I'll put it up on the screen, and I want people to go check that out, because they admit that this is a new religion. This is nothing that was, it's not supported historically. And so that means, what's the difference? What's the difference? If you have a new religion that you call Christianity, or Lokiism, or whatever, the last one that you just did, where you had all the you showed on screen all the Lokians, and as they were speaking, and you had the one girl that was rocking back and forth, and you had they had their nose rings in, that video there. What's the difference between Christianity and this new belief system? If they both profess this lacking sickness, this loathing, then there is no difference. Then you have to ask yourself, well, why did these Lokians, here we go, right here. There, check out that video, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Why Loki worship is a bad idea with Stefan Tim. And so I think the reason that they're not still with Christianity is twofold. One, I think Christianity rejected them, and so therefore they have to form something new, because Christianity wants a certain persona, and when they reject these people who they view as outcasts, then what they do is they create something entirely new, and they get it from Hollywood, from what was that character? Floki in the Vikings. Okay. And then they create these, their delusions, their own mental delusions of this Loki giant talking to them, and how he's so fun, and he just talks in common language, and so on and so forth. And so, yes, that was the one. That was the one with Stefan Tim. So these limited worldviews create that, making that whole new religion, which they claim to be there. It's not what we have to realize about these people. Is, if you do the math, if you look at them and you approximate an age to them, let's just say the average age is 20. Let's just say that. And then we say, okay, this is 2026, and we went into COVID-19 lockdowns in 2020. That means that these people were 14 when their worldview was even more restricted, when the governments of the world took these people who and took away all of their life experiences from them, and more completely limited their worldview. Then what we have here is, we have, in my opinion, a very low IQ religion that doesn't know how to properly decipher or interpret the world around them. And so they look for some created delusion in their mind, and they say, oh, well, there's this Hollywood character, and they make a new religion based on that. And now these COVID lockaways, we'll just call them, it may be getting worse here with these the rat poop found on the ship, because we may be looking at a round 2. Maybe not. I'm just saying that if it does, then we're going to be dealing with a whole nother round of potential Loki worshipers, or what have you. So I'm going to bring up a certain sect or cult of Christianity that hang on just a minute, that you may not be familiar with, or may not have heard. It may be lost to the the history of Christianity, and it's called the flagellants. Now, the flagellants were around the 13th century, 14th century, right in there. And who they were, and this comes back full circle back into these Lokians, these Loki worshipers. These flagellants from the Bible viewed their flesh as evil, because that's what the Jew named Saul, who on the road to Damascus saw the bright and shining light and said, "Oh, that was Jesus," mental delusion, and changed his name to Paul, and then wrote many of the New Testament books. Okay, that's what Paul says, that the flesh is evil, and he must chastise that flesh daily. From that, you have the flagellants that they would literally and physically whip their flesh because they looked at the flesh as evil. So why do I bring up these flagellants and the sinful flesh with Paul? Because mark my words, that these people in this new invented religious cult of Loki cut themselves. Mark my words. I have seen enough of them throughout the course of my life and in my previous career. They cut themselves. And the reason they do this is to let out the pain. And this is no different than the flagellants of the 13th century. They are cutting themselves so that they bleed, because the release of the pain is through the blood. Mark my words, they do this. The ones that Odin Manuson put in his video, I don't know personally, but every one of them, every single one of them, whether it was Christians or whether it was people who had Loki tattoos on their body or bull rings in their noses or what have you, they cut themselves to let out the pain. Flagellants. Self-inflicted. I have a note written to myself as self-inflicted, because they're the future of these Loki worshipers is, yes, I agree. The Lokians turn our ancestral gods into Marxist saints, just like the Catholic Church did. But the Lokians don't like the name Wotan, just as the church made him into a demon. 100%. 100% I agree with that. All right, Steve, what'd you write? I hate how religions can take a verse in one context and then run with it. Me too. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm about to get into Lokasenna 9, which will kind of lead me into Lokasenna 26 and 27, because I think that is maybe part of what is driving this belief system in Loki, other than the mental illusions. I think they like to warp what our lore actually says, or they use what has already been corrupted to their own benefit, to their own mental delusion, so that they can have this something new where they feel like they fit in, even though their trickster god of lacking of this self-loathing has them going a little deeper on each cut. And you want to know who the pure evil is in this? Is the people that are leading them to that, knowing that that is their future. So what is their future? Well, one of those cuts is going to get too deep. Okay. Or the ultimate self-inflicted. And then they'll realize the failure that their belief in Loki was. And some of the other options, and I have seen this, is domestic violence. These people will pair up with somebody who is that sadistic, that's what they engage in. And then their whole life revolves around this now. This is their life, because that is what Loki gave them. So who was this provided by? who really invented this. And it's all Abrahamic intrusion. These, just like Christianity, it's Abrahamic intrusion into ancient ways, into ancient culture. Because if you look at Odin and Freya and Tyr and Freya, what comes to mind? Like you said, they have to demonize them. They have to make them into something that they're not in our lore. And in our lore, these embody strength. These embody honor and ancestry. Ancestry, family, frith. That's what our ancient belief honors. That's what our ancient gods, our pre-Christian, pre-Judaism gods actually honor, is strength. Strength of family, folk. And with that, you get frith, peace. And those teachings, going back up to child rearing, is what should be passed to our posterity. Because what does Christianity pass on? I covered this in a previous video, my Hela video. The same thing that this new religion in Loki passes on. Lacking, self-loathing, not strength. And what are they trying to accomplish? Well, I just read it to you with the Saxony Grove and 4,500 killed by Christianity. Oh, but that was Charlemagne, Charles Pipison, acting out of bounds, according to them. Yeah. The person they created to do their dirty work, right? Yeah. So Odin and Loki are not brothers. They're not brothers. They're not blood brothers. They are nothing alike. Odin is one of the gods of our belief system. Loki is a deceptive, lacking giant that the only reason he's allowed to be in the sea halls is because he's a fief. He has to pay a fee. And this is all in Lokasenna 9, which now I will put on the screen so we can take a look at what Lokasenna 9 actually says. Where is Lokasenna 9? All right, well, hang on a minute. I'm going to add Lokasenna 9. I thought I had it on here. Give me 2 seconds. I'll put this image file up here. There we go. All right. Lokasenna 9. This is properly translated. This isn't the Abrahamic bullcrap that we have in our books that these Loki believers can then latch on to and then make their new religion because of whatever the translators decided they wanted to put in there about Odin and Loki being brothers. It says that, remember that Odin, who knows in ancient days when Kvasir's blood was mixed together with honey, the mead was concealed in Suttung's dales, and then by Odin, possession of the lean debt taken, binding both to their shelter or abode when carried. So where did I get that from? I got that from, I'm going to leave that on the screen as I read to you what the actual Old Norse says. It says Loki kvath, which means Loki speaks. Munt that Odin. Okay, remember that Odin is vit I ordauga, who knows in ancient days, is blendum blothi samen. Okay, that word is blood, salmon, when the same blood was blended. Okay, it is to mix, denoting a time that blood was mixed together. Ulvi bergja. Ulvi means ale or mead. Bergja means to hide or conceal. Now, why would they be talking about blood brothers if they're all then in the very next line, they're talking about ale or mead being concealed? They weren't talking about blood brothers. Let's ego mundo, alone or debt. Possession of the lien debt. Nema okra, varib bathumboret. Take possession or take uses of. Now, I'm going to leave that on the screen because if you recall, this stanza and what it's talking about is Odin had to sneak into the giant's hall, Suttung's hall, pose as a husband to Gunnlod. Again, not literal. Yes, 100%. It is about Kvasir's blood. Yep. So he had a pose as a husband to Gunnlod. Then, when he returned to Osgard with the mead, he had to conceal himself again, just like the stanza says. The giants then came looking for him. They called him Bulverki. Remember, and that means the evil or misfortune worker because he had just taken possession of the precious mead. So therefore, it was an evil to the giants that Odin came and stole the mead from them that they had originally stolen and secreted in Suttung's hall. This entire stanza has nothing to do with Odin and Loki as brothers, nor about Odin mixing blood with anyone. It has to do with Loki wanting to be in that hall. And so what did he do? He used the fact that he knew that Odin took the blood, the mead from Suttung's hall and secreted it away. And he used that as a way to manipulate. So therefore, he was in the ancestral hall only because of that fee that had to be paid. And when we look at stanza 26, yes, the mead does belong to the court of Osgard, where Kvasir came from. Yes, 100%. And when we look to stanzas 26 and 27 of Lokasenna, which in case the Lokians can't figure out, comes after 9, multiple stanzas after 9. Freya, when she's challenged about Vil and Ve being in her bosom, again, not literal, she calls Loki a fief in the ancestral home. He doesn't belong there. He's not a god. He's a giant playing giants games. And that's all he is. That's all he will ever be. And these people who worship Loki are being deluded by Loki, just like Christians are being deluded by Loki, who is Jesus, who is Yahweh. And I brought it up. I'm going to touch on this, and this will be one of the last things I touch on here, because that Lokasenna 26 and 27 about Freya, where her fidelity is questioned, and it shouldn't be, because this is where knowing nature it's so important, because and properly translating things so they're not in an Abrahamic picture to us. Odin being the nighttime god, the presider over wintertime, that time from blood month in Samhain through the winter months, through the 3 giantess maidens of the Fimbul winter. Talking a lot. The back into Vor with the overlap with Freya, with the runes and the magic being taught to one another. Who would be Odin's brothers? Vil and Ve. Well, what do their names mean? And if you look at the northern pagan year, Vil and Ve means will and woe. So who did Freya have in her, or not Freya, I'm sorry, Freya have in her bosom? Well, when Freya is depicted as also Jord, which means earth, and that's an important thing too. Digression, real quick. It's not called Yorthgarth; it's called Mithgarth. Mithgarth, middle fence. Yorthgarth would be earth, the fence of earth. So it's called Mithgarth. So just throw that into context with some of my previous videos. So when you put this into a natural nature flow of things, the earth, who does the earth have in her bosom at the beginning of winter nights? But woe, when things are dying, when herds have to be reduced, when they're about to go into very long times of darkness, where Baldur is decreasing. And pretty soon it's just going to be the pyre, just the red glow along the horizon. And then Angrboda's heart is thrice burnt, which is your three giantess maidens of the 3 months, where Loki eats that heart and then gives birth. Loki, as a hermaphrodite, then gives birth to the sons and daughters, the things of Jormungandr and Hela and the Fenris wolf. It's not that Loki is a shapeshifter. It is that Loki is hermaphroditic. He is the same thing as Jesus, the same thing as Yaldabaoth, Yahweh. So then you go into the time of Ostri, where things are born. You have will, happiness. So when Earth takes into her bosom, when Earth, Jörth, Freya, is united with Odin and gives birth to, I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself, because Freya and Jörth both give birth to different things. And so that maybe be in another video. But the two partners that are on either side of that are Odin's brothers. So you have Woe is Odin's brother, which then turns into Odin, which is the presiding nighttime god. And then that turns into Will, which is spring. It's a very poetic Edda. It's a very poetic flow to everything, to teach us what? To teach us strength. These were stories passed down to children over millennia, to teach strength, not falling on your knees, to stand on your own 2 feet, to view the cycles of nature and observe their strength, not the lacking self-loathing that was thrust in forced conversions upon our folk. That becomes very obvious. So in our book, which, as a side note, in the beginning, I played those couple of short videos about where the mountains were, and I showed the Taiga biome, Udalir and Uller. And on the back of our books, I don't know if you can see it, if you have one of our books, this picture here of my wife and I is with those same types of mountains in the background. And these are very important to our lore, to our ancient belief system. And with that, there's a lot of frith, a lot of peace that I can take, because I don't know if you guys are believers. Whoops. No, there you go. If you missed it the first time, you can screen grab that now. I don't know if you guys are believers in Pangea, the supercontinent. And this is from hundreds of millions of years ago. So please don't make the mistake that I'm saying that our ancestors were part of Pangea, because this is from hundreds of millions of years ago. And I wasn't back there. then. So I can't tell you if I have somebody from my family tree, but probably not, because it's hundreds of millions of years ago. But I wanted to show you something that, I've been in the woods a lot, and I was going to read an assignment that I did for a comp class that I took, a writing class that I took. And this comp class wanted us to paint a picture for the instructor and other students of something that we had been involved with. And so I picked the Grove. I chose the Grove. And the reason I chose the Grove is because it held such an immense image in my mind. It's a picture that to this day I cannot get rid. I couldn't, if I wanted to, I couldn't get rid of it. But who knows? Maybe old age will one day take it away from me. And in the meantime, I hope to pass that down to as much as my posterity, so that they can look for images, similar images, and as part of their worldview. So this image was, as I was hunting, and they forecasted snow, and I was walking through the deciduous woods, the hardwood trees, and I came to an area that I knew there was a line of yew trees, a line of fir trees. And so I had my peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, my apples, my little bite-sized candy bars in my pockets. And so as I'm walking through, the snow was getting deeper. It started coming down a lot harder. I'm a good couple miles into the woods at this point, and the leaves were still crunching underfoot, even though the snow was starting to accumulate in the branches. I mean, clash. You talk about, you get 10 kids together, give them all wooden sticks and say, okay, you 5 are on one team, you 5 are on the other team, and you're at a battle, go. And they start clack. That's what these branches, and change that from 10 to 100. And these kids are just clashing and clashing. That's what these trees sounded like. And so I come to this line of fir trees, and they're starting to get snow on the branches and everything. And I push through, and I come inside, and all of a sudden it's just like this complete change. And it was like entering into this different realm, this almost like a snow globe, if you will, where there was an outside and there was an inside. And in my assignment, I described these fir trees as one-armed sentinels, or one-legged sentinels dressed in ghillie suits, that were protecting the inside from the ruckus that was being on the outside. And I went in there, and it was this wide open area, and there was yellow pine needles all over the ground, almost like the streets of gold. And so I'm looking around in there, and you can hear, if you concentrate on it, you could hear the wind blowing outside of those sentinels. But on the inside, it was much quieter. And you could look up, and you could see the trees moving, but not even as much snow was falling in there. So it was, every now and then you'd get some filtering down into that grove. And so I found a tree. I propped my gun up against the fallen log, and I sat there, and I'm glad it wasn't a huldra or a skuggsra. All right, I digress. But I sat there, and I pulled out my lunch, and I enjoyed a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and an apple. And that's a mental picture. And the reason I bring that up is because of the image on the screen. The Pangea, the supercontinent that was formed hundreds of millions of years ago. If you look at the pink area, okay, that is a mountain section. Okay, now the one on the left where everything is combined together, it's all one long string of continuous mountains. And then as the continental shift happened and drift happened, okay, that same mountain chain was broken apart. So you have the Caledonian Mountains over in Scandinavia and Europe, but over in the Americas, you have the Adirondacks, which go down into the Appalachian Mountains. And this is I got a few pictures here. So this is another, and the way they linked all of this together was through fossils and fauna and that were present in both the old world and what we now call the new world. And so these matching fossils, they could track based on where the continents used to be joined together. And so here's the next image right here. It was also done not only by fossils, but by rock type. So there's a point I'm getting at here. And that point is, when I've been up in these mountains, and I took great peace, great solace from being there, because that's what paganism is. It's that attachment to nature, and it is the nature that our folk were around, that these stories came from, that these movements, that these natural cycles in nature and the cosmos were used to teach strength, family, folk, frith, nature, ancestry. And when I looked at that Pangea map, and I realized that not the same mountains, but the same types of mountains. I can close my eyes and I could envision my ancestors thousands of years ago walking on these mountain chains that are now separated by an ocean. And they're looking at very similar things in nature as to what I'm looking at when I walk in nature separated by an ocean, because they were once the same. They were once the same mountain strain or stretch. And yes, Christians are anti-nature 100%. And I just listened to somebody last night, and I had to pause the video, and I had to look at my wife, and they were denouncing rural people. And I'm like, where did that even come from? And these are who our ancestors, and even if you're a Christian right now, I hope you do realize that your ancestry was not Christian, because your Christian ancestry can only go back so far, and then it becomes pagan. And the strength that you have, maybe whatever strength that is or is limited to at this point, is residual from your pagan ancestry, because Christianity and Abrahamic and Judaism and Abrahamic paganism are doing everything to try to kill that strength and honor and folk. In our book, one of our books, I'm just going to read you a couple little things here, because it goes along these lines of what our northern nature is. And in our poems book, before our poems, I put in there why we use the terminology we use. Okay. And in Mythgarth Spirits, I point out right in the table of contents that Mythgarth means a middle fence. It's not earth. Earth is earth, not Mythgarth. And that the yew tree is the heathen holy tree. Now, where did I get that the yew tree, which is our world tree, is the heathen holy tree? Because it says it in our lore. So if you look at Voluspo 27, and it says, Heth vonum helium bothmi. Okay, Heth vonum means heathen, Heth, plus hope or expectation. Okay, Helium means holy, and Bothmi means tree. So you have a heathen holy tree that's in Mythgarth. That is Mythgarth. And then in Grim the Small, 4 and 5, they come right out and they say, land is hilat. Land is hilat, which means the land is holy. This land, our ancestors, these groves, our ancestors looked at this as a holy land of the north. And these groves is what Abraham targeted for destruction, as well as our people. Rewind the video. It's in there. So, and that was in poem 3, Mithgar Spirits. In poem 4 of that book, Visions of Fall, I point out where the elk, the stag, and the wolf were prevalent in the Northeast, and how they were targeted by Abraham for extinction. And it's very systematic. You end up seeing a definite mode of operandi with these cults of Abraham, and I'm including this whole Loki worship as just another cult of Abraham. And if we go into another lockdown because of the rat turd virus that might be coming up, then it's either going to embolden that group because now they're going to feel in their comfort zone being locked away in their own mental delusions, or it's going to create the next one. But either way, it is still a limitation, is a degradation of the information available. Their worldview, their pictures become more limited. So let me go through some of the comments here before I leave. And Arminius Unstoppable says that Christians are anti-nature. Yes, I agree. And he goes on to say, you can't be one with Jesus and still be tied with the seasonal cycles of nature. No, you can't be 100% because of that anti-nature aspect of Christianity, that destruction of everything that is nature, for whether that be for religious reasons to destroy the groves, or whether that be for filthy lucre's sake. Line the pockets of the billionaires as everybody else suffers by another whatever manipulation of stock prices, manipulation of fuel prices, food prices, manipulation of your freedoms with a lockdown. Residual spot on. Thank you. Europeans built the West, not Christianity. Yes, agreed. 100%. And that book that I said I was reading, I put it in one of my other videos about Matthew. Here it is right here. This one here, they show that our founding fathers were not Christian. That is a very good book if you want to get some points and tips to throw out there at other people. Finger red number 1. Finger don't know what you mean. That's why there has been a tax on the farming way of life and on country music and such. Yep, I agree. And if you follow the reasoning of all these high gas prices with the current war for Abraham that's going on, blood on the altar of Abraham, then it's not just fuel that goes through the Strait of Hormuz. It's also fertilizer. And so be prepared, because food is going to take a double whammy. And where do we get our food? But from farms. Unlike, I can't remember what that one person was. I don't know. She considered herself an entertainer. She thought that meat just came from the grocery store. Well, her ignorance aside, the prices are going to go up when even more so. I mean, the billionaires will still be able to have their filet mignon and lobster, and by the thousands of dollars. It's just the people who are the wage slaves that are going to be really paying the price for these manipulations of everything. So I am going to end my video here. I've covered a lot of information, and hopefully I've explained myself with the whole picture philosophy and where a lot of these mindsets come from, and how some are, I mean, they're not some, but they're all just not justified. And so until next time, or tils nästa gång, good health, sir.